Hello, everyone. I'm so happy that you could all join us today for Weight, Metabolism, and Aging, the science behind fasting and keto. This promises to be a compelling and constructive discussion. I am Sarah Smith, the editor-in-chief of Prevention, and I'll be talking to our terrific experts today and taking your questions for them too later. Before I introduce them though, let me tell you how fascinating it is to dive into the science of aging here in our Live Better Longer series put on by the American Federation for Aging Research along with Prevention. If you love knowing not just what people think is good for you, but why, we are here to explore those things. AFAR is a real leader in making sure there is science happening in our world, science that is poised to change our lives. And Prevention, where I work, has been a wellness leader for decades, and we are very proud of our association with AFAR and our mutual commitment to bringing the latest research to all of you. So today, to talk about weight metabolism and aging, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. John Newman of the Salk Institute for Research on Aging and the Division of Geriatrics at the University of California, San Francisco, and also Dr. Satchin Panda of the Salk Institute for Biological Studies and the author of the Circadian Code. So hello, doctors.
Hello, I'm glad to be here.
Hi, Sarah. Happy to be here.
Great. Thank you both. I'd love to start by asking you both if you could tell us about your area of expertise, but also how you got interested in it. Why do you think it's so fascinating? Dr. Newman, could you start us off?
Sure. So I'm a geriatrician and I'm a basic scientist who studies the mechanisms of aging. And that's how I got into ketone bodies. The audience, the folks of you listening who are interested in AFAR probably feel the same way I do, that I still have this like childlike enthusiasm of wow, we can actually understand the biological mechanisms of aging at like a cellular molecular level and understand them and even manipulate them. And I still feel that sense of wonder. The geriatrician in me is really excited about using this understanding of the mechanisms of why we age to understand the complex problems of older adults. And that's what I focus on in my basic science and my clinical translational science. Where ketones fit in is, as many of the audience know, there are really tight links between metabolism and aging. And we can talk a little bit about the history of that. But one of those links is that many of the molecular mechanisms that we study that affect what we see as aging are controlled by metabolism. And one of those links that links metabolism to aging, we think, are ketone bodies. And we'll talk a lot more about that.
We will. Thank you. Thank you for giving us that great intro overview. Dr. Panda, how about you? Can you tell us about your area and what's so interesting about it?
So I work on circadian rhythms, and when people hear the word circadian rhythms, they usually think about sleep and wakefulness. So every day or every night, our brain has to get into this sleep, 7 to 8 hours of sleep to repair, reset, and rejuvenate. And that's great for the mental health. But at the same time, over the last 20 years, my research also revealed that almost every organ in our body, just like our brain, has a circadian clock. And the function of the clock is to make sure that every cell is healthy and is repaired and is rejuvenated almost on a daily basis. But at the same time, we also made a discovery that just like our brain needs sleep and wakefulness for a robust clock, circadian clock, healthy clock, the rest of our body needs daily eating and fasting to take care of the clocks in all of our organs, whether it's heart, gut, liver, muscle, you name it. So then we got interested in this concept called time-restricted eating, which is now popular as intermittent fasting. And what we find is if people and animals eat consistently every day within 8 to 10 or maximum 12 hours, that helps the entire body to reset, rejuvenate, and repair itself on a daily basis so that we can age slower and we can prevent, reverse, and manage a wide range of diseases and conditions starting from overweight, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and even cancer and dementia. So this is a very rapidly growing area of research, and I'm super excited to see that one simple daily habit that anyone anywhere in the world can do can have such a multi-solving benefit on entire health.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm really looking forward to diving into both of these areas, time restricted eating, ketones. But even before we do that, I thought it might be helpful if we address even just a little bit the issue that might have brought a lot of people here in the first place today, which is, why is weight loss harder as we age? And why is it worth thinking about beyond the eat less, exercise more advice, that people throw around all the time?
Yeah, so John, you want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess first, just to acknowledge that, yeah, it is harder to maintain your weight as we get older. I'm certainly in that group already, and there's a lot of reasons for that, as Satchin will dive into too. As we get older, what we eat may change, but also how we live changes, and our bodies are changing underneath all of that. So we tend to get less active, we tend to move around less, but also as we age, our body's metabolism, this is sort of a cliche, but I think we understand it more and more at a deeper level now. Our body's metabolism does change. How we use energy changes. We need less energy, in part because of the same, our bodies are using less energy to do the repair and rejuvenation processes that we all have. And so it gets harder to maintain our weight. Or maybe another way of turning that around is we have to constantly adjust how we live in order to maintain our weight, in order to fit our body's needs. But those changes in metabolism are about more than weight too. And this will tie back to, why am I studying ketone bodies for problems of aging and of older adults? Well, because many of the most important problems that older adults face, and dementia certainly is a big one, but other problems of the aging brain too, like delirium, which I spend a lot of time studying, part of why they happen to older adults are because of these changes in metabolism, because the body has a harder time ramping up its energy production when it needs to, when you're sick, when your brain needs more energy to cope with unfolded proteins in Alzheimer's disease or whatnot. So on the one hand, one way that many people experience this is trouble maintaining weight, but there is also kind of another angle to that, and that these metabolic changes, it's so important to understand them, because they also affect these diseases of aging that we're trying to figure out better how to prevent and how to treat better.
Yes, John, thank you for giving that primer on how with aging our metabolism changes. This is a very new and exciting area. And I must remind all the audience that, if you dial back to some 1910 or 1920, the life expectancy in this country was only 45 to 50 years of age. So that means only in the last 50 years, the vast majority of us can live beyond the age of 40, 45 for at least 3-4 decades. And this also gives us a chance and challenge for scientific community, because for the first time in human history, we are living more number of years in post-reproductive age. So for women, it's post-menopausal age, and for men, you can say low testosterone, that kind of age. So we are still learning about it. But from circadian point of view, what we also know is as we age, our sleep becomes very fragmented. We wake up too many times, so we don't get good night of sleep. And when we don't get enough sleep, our brain cannot make good decisions. And in a given day, we make nearly more than 200 decisions about what to eat, how much to eat, when to eat, what combination to eat. So we tend to overeat because our brain is sleep deprived and cannot decide. So that's the biological aspect of what happens from circadian point of view. Then there is practical aspect. And I would allude to two different things. One is during our lifetime, we also accumulate a lot of damages. For example, almost anyone, most of you who are above the age of 50 may experience some pain in joints and muscles. So that reduces our mobility. So it's really hard for a 50 or 60-year-old to complete a 5 miles run every other day, whereas a 20, 25-year-old can actually do that. So there is a biomechanical aspect to aging that reduces our mobility. So we cannot move more to lose weight. And since we're sleep deprived and we cannot think clearly about what to eat, how much to eat, even though we know that our metabolism has reduced, we cannot adjust. The third thing is a lot of us, nearly 1/3 to maybe half of us, are taking some kind of medications to control blood pressure, blood sugar, many other aspects of life. And what we are learning is many of these medications also have adverse side effects. And one of the side effects can be weight gain or fluid retention. So it becomes even much harder for people who are on some of these medications to try to lose weight. So these are some of the practical aspects of why it becomes difficult to lose weight. But the good news is there's some control. We can change, we can make small changes in our behavior, and that will help us to lose some weight. And second is, even if we don't lose weight, we can actually become healthier with no or even little weight loss.
That's I love to hear that there's some small things and practical things that you think that will work for people. Can you tell us more about your work around well, tell us time restricted eating versus intermittent fasting? I've heard them used interchangeably. Are they? And is there a difference? And if there is, why is it important for us to know?
Yeah, so intermittent fasting is a very broad term, and it includes any type of fasting, ranging from fasting for 1 day in a week to 2 days in a week, to even 5 days in every month or 5 days in every 3 months. It's called periodic fasting, alternate day fasting. And so all these concepts were there before we introduced the term time-restricted eating. And the way time-restricted eating research is done, at least in basic science, is slightly different, because all the other forms of fasting came from their origin lies in caloric restriction, or the concept that if you reduce calorie for 1 or several days, then you can get some health benefits. In time-restricted eating, in animal experiments, we do not intentionally reduce any calorie on any of the days. The animals can eat the same number of calories as the animals that have access to food 24/7. The only thing is they have to eat that calorie within 8 to 10 or maximum 12 hours every day. And by doing that, what we find in basic science and laboratory research is we can prevent, reverse, or manage their chronic conditions and body weight. So in a way, if you're thinking of cars, the term car covers everything from pickup van to electric car to plug-in hybrid. So similarly, you can think of intermittent fasting as a broad term, and time-restricted eating is just one form of that intermittent fasting. The only difference is you have to do it every day, or at least 5 to 6 days in a week, and you have to be consistent within sticking to the same eating window, so that your circadian rhythm is reinforced. Just like you have to sleep every day at around the same time to have good night's sleep and restorative sleep. Similarly, from circadian point of view, you have to eat within 8 to 10 or maximum 12 hours to maintain a healthy circadian rhythm throughout your body, so that it pays back to you in terms of good health and maybe modest weight loss.
Thank you. That really helps clarify what we're talking about, and why it's so important. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that commitment and that in a moment. But while we're sort of clarifying things for people, Dr. Newman, what do you think people might not know about ketones or the ketone diet that misconceptions or information that you think is worth people really understanding as we continue on talking?
I think one of the most important things is that ketone bodies are a normal part of our body, and they're there all the time too. So what are ketone bodies? Maybe I'll briefly. I know most people in the audience are probably experts and would be ready for a master's class. But for the rest of us, ketone bodies are one of the ways that your body metabolizes fats for fuel. So they're little molecules. Your liver makes them. They're sort of like batteries, right? So they're a way of converting energy from one form into another, so your body can use it. When your body needs to burn fat, some of that will go to your liver. Your liver turns into ketone bodies, and then the ketone bodies then go to your heart, your muscles, your brain, and your cells use them to produce energy and do whatever your cells need to do. And they do that all the time. Now, normally we're not making a lot of ketone bodies because we're eating. Satchin has done some incredible research about how, in modern life, most of us are eating from the moment we open our eyes to the moment we close them at night, and we don't make a lot of ketone bodies when we're eating. When we're fasting, then we start to make a lot more because we're burning our fat. But we do still do it all the time. And one of the interesting things we're learning is that ketone bodies are obviously really important in fasting. And there's something that kind of links actually the idea of ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting. But they're important all the time for our bodies too. They have important functions in just helping our bodies to get through day-to-day life. Some really interesting work on this was done by Omer Yilmaz at MIT, showing how ketone bodies that are made in the intestine, so not even in the liver, but just made in the intestine all the time, help to keep stem cells in the intestine working normally. So that's something that I think most people don't know, that ketone bodies are part of normal life, and they're important for our bodies normally, especially as we age, and we're learning more and more about them.
So when people become so much more interested in ketones because of the popular keto diet, what's happening in that scenario?
Where does the keto diet fit in now?
Yeah, exactly.
So the ketogenic diet is a way of sort of tricking your body to make more ketone bodies. So ordinarily we'll make a lot of ketone bodies when we're fasting, when there's no food around at all. But if you're mostly eating fats and not eating carbohydrates, not eating sugars or other carbohydrates, your body is relying on fat for fuel, and it will turn a lot of those fats into ketone bodies in order to use them. So a ketogenic diet is a way for your body to make a lot of ketone bodies without actually fasting, without while still eating and while still having lots of energy around, but you're making ketone bodies. It's sort of a way to simulate part of the fasting metabolism. And that's an important point, I think, that ties together a lot of what we're talking about today. It still blows my mind what Satchin was saying about how, what we've learned about fasting and dietary restriction in the lab is that you can actually eat the same calories, and the science on this is now really very rigorous. These animals in the lab can eat the same number of calories, but if they have a fasting period, they do better. They control their weight better, and they're healthier and they live longer. So it's not just about the calories, it's actually changing the way your body works. And a big part of that is switching your body into a fasting-like metabolism where don't have a lot of sugar around, instead you're burning fats, and part of that may be having ketone bodies around.
Interesting. So Dr. Panda, in this, I also wanted to bring up this issue of the calories may be the same, but, I think there are some self-styled, experts who might say, well, you can eat anything you want, just only eat for 6 hours or 8 hours a day. And what do you say to that? What are we talking about in your world in terms of what you're eating in that time frame?
Yeah, so I want to connect with what John just said about ketogenic ketones, because those are really very important points. And it's better to dive a little deep into it, then we'll come back to your question. And when we think about, say, eating, the one thing is we use the word time-restricted eating, not fasting, because a lot of people, yes, there are some people who like the word fasting, but then when we do clinical research, we bring people into the clinic and ask, can you do fasting? They would say no. But if we say, you can eat whatever you are eating now within 8 to 10 hours, can you do it? Then they would say, yes, we can do it. So it's a semantic that changes how we think. So now coming back to what happens during this eating and fasting cycle. Basic science in endocrinology for the last 50 years has taught us very, very solid science that when we eat something, and in real life situation, when we eat something, most of the stuff has some carbohydrate, fat, and protein. our body, in response to that food, will produce little insulin, and that insulin will store some carbohydrate as fat. It will also store some fat, and then use some carbohydrate or glucose as energy. After our last meal of the day, as we go into that overnight fasting, maybe after 6 to 8 or maybe 10 hours of fasting, then our body will slowly get use up most of the glycogen or carbohydrate storage, and then it may begin to break down some fat to make ketone bodies. So if you're doing an overnight fast of say 16 hours and eating only for 8 hours, then the last 3 to 4 hours of that fasting, your body is already making a good amount of ketone to keep your heart and brain and muscle working. So now coming back to your question, whether people can eat anything. And now, if we connect these two, then you would suspect that, well, if I eat too much carbohydrate, then maybe it will take me, my body will take a long time to get rid of or use up all the carbohydrate and then switch on to ketone. So that makes sense, because if you are storing a lot of carbohydrate, you are beginning with a lot of carbohydrate, then it will take a long time. And you may not get the benefit of that ketogenesis that happens towards the end, last 2 to 3 hours. So that's why the first step may be many self-styled gurus and guides who are coaching you to say that you can eat anything. This is a hook so that you can get in and you can start practicing. And in real life, what we find is once you start practicing, then automatically you may reduce your after dinner snacks and after dinner alcohol, and a lot of that is carbohydrates. So you are automatically reducing some carbohydrate. And second thing is carbohydrate, particularly highly processed food and highly processed carbohydrates. They create an insulin spike, and then you have a glucose dip. So you will likely to feel very hungry after a few hours. So in real life, it'll be very hard if you just eat highly processed food, for example, basmati rice or something that has a lot of carbohydrate, well processed. It'll be really hard to practice intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating because your hunger drive will be so strong that it will be hard. In laboratory experiment, we do the experiment because we take away all the food from mice, so they have no way to go and reach out. But in real life for humans, we will always find food. And it's within 5 feet. Now, if you're sitting there, just look around in the same room, there is some food. So that's why it's important to make small changes to what you eat. But you can begin with whatever you're eating, and you'll slowly notice the changes. And then once you have one discipline of stopping eating at a certain time, you can pick up another discipline of reducing your carbohydrate diet intake so that you can get the natural benefit of producing more ketone. And to add to that, just like John said, if we increase your good fat intake, then that again doubles your benefit. So you combine time-restricted eating with low carbohydrate diet or a ketogenic diet, then you can reap even more benefit.
Dr. Newman, could you speak to the issue of the consistency here? You know, Dr. Panda talks about, you know, sticking with it and the circadian rhythm aspect of the time restricted eating, but how does that play into how we develop the ketone bodies as well? Is it something you could do for 2 days in a week and then stop?
Like I can tell you a little bit about how consistency would work with ketone bodies. Of course, I don't use ketogenic diets in my clinical practice, so this is not, you know, something that I do as a doctor. But it's an interesting question because a lot of people will ask. So if we think that having ketone bodies around sometimes is good for you, and I think, and we can talk more about the science of that. Well, does that mean you have to be on some regimen for your entire life? And maybe, and the science so far says maybe not. So for example, I studied ketone bodies in the laboratory, and one of the first questions we wanted to answer when we first kind of had this connection between aging fasting, metabolism, and ketone bodies is, would mice that ate a ketogenic diet be healthier as they get older or live longer? So we did that experiment a couple years ago now, and the mice that were eating a ketogenic diet did actually live longer. Another group did it with us, or did a similar experiment at the same time. We did them slightly differently. One of the key ways that we did it differently is that they fed the mice the ketogenic diet all the time, and they lived longer, and their brains were healthier when they were older. We actually only fed them the ketogenic diet some of the time, about half the time, every other week. And this was not really on purpose. This was kind of an experimental necessity so that they didn't gain weight. Mice, unlike humans, gain weight on a ketogenic diet. But they weren't eating it all the time, and yet they still were healthier, they still lived longer, and they still had healthier brains later on. And the really interesting thing we found was that they actually had healthier brains, and their memory worked better, even when they weren't eating the ketogenic diet later on. So I think there's some hope that that ketone bodies, at least, the biology that's kind of encapsulated by ketone bodies, might be something that sticks around, might be something that we could work out how to do intermittently or when needed, and may not necessarily be something that people need to do for the rest of their all or nothing for the rest of my life or never. But when it comes to a ketogenic diet, I can tell you that it is hard to do for just a couple of days, because your body needs to adapt to it, needs to adapt to using all that fat and to making ketone bodies, and that happens over a period of a week or two, or even a little bit longer. So what I've heard from my colleagues is ketogenic diets are easier to do the longer you do it, but the first week, is everyone says, is the hardest. And this is one reason, as we're starting to think about clinical applications of ketone bodies and ketogenic diets, to think about how to break it down a little bit. For example, can we give ketone bodies directly, essentially as a drug, so not as part of a ketogenic diet? And that's something that a lot of scientists are interested in part for that question.
Oh, that's so great. And I'm really glad you brought up about the brain and the other long-term health impacts, because I'm hoping, Dr. Panda, you can speak to that too, because it seems to me that weight, while many of us want to lose weight and we want to do it in a healthy way, it's so interconnected with overall health. And so, could you speak to time restricted eating in that sense of how it's affecting our overall health? I think there's some blood pressure, heart issues, and I'm sure you can tell us.
Yeah. No, I'll just continue where John left off. That is, again, people will ask, do we have to do all 7 days? What we are seeing is, both in mice and humans, people who can do time restricting for 10 hours for 5 days, they still see a lot of benefits. So now, going back to humans, although we could not ask mice how they felt or what they feel like when they do time restricting, we are pleasantly surprised when human studies started, because in our first study, we asked our participants to do time restricting of 10 hours only for 16 weeks. Then they lost modest amount of body weight, and they came back after 1 year. So between 16 weeks and 1 year, there was no contact with them. And they were still doing it. And we asked, why are you still doing it? It was not the weight loss that was driving it. What was surprising was they said they slept much better, and they felt more energetic throughout the day, particularly more energy in the morning, and they felt less hungry at bedtime. So this was kind of our window into looking more deeply. And almost all of them who had acid reflux, they also said that their acid reflux got better. So a lot of them got off their acid reflux heartburn medication. So then in the subsequent studies, what we're finding is almost all time restricting studies published so far, they report much better blood pressure control, whether people are already taking blood pressure medication or not. So that's a great news, because nearly 1 in 2 adult Americans do have either pre-hypertension or hypertension. And if this habit can reduce blood pressure, that's great. And what is more interesting is the reduction in blood pressure did not correlate with the reduction in weight. So that means even people who did not lose weight, just by doing time restricting with their usual diet, they didn't have to change. We didn't ask them to change that. they could still see improvement in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. And then the third thing that we find is a lot of people who do time-restricted eating for several weeks, maybe few months, and they report their back pain and some of the joint pain slightly goes down. That might be due to reduction in systemic inflammation. That's what we are finding in mouse study and now in human studies. Then we also find people who are pre-diabetic or early stage diabetic taking metformin. And if we combine pre-diabetes and early stage diabetes, type 2 diabetes, there are nearly 95 million people, adults in this country. Nearly 2 out of 5 adults have pre-diabetes or diabetes. They can also control their blood glucose much better. So in that way, this sounds like a multi-solving habit, but at the same time, you might think that, okay, so how can one simple habit change so many things? But at the same time, just try. If you sleep deprive yourself for 5 days, almost all of your conditions will worsen. So similarly, if you fix your body circadian rhythm by time-restricted eating, then we can expect to improve most of our health conditions. At the same time, I must emphasize that there are a lot of studies going on right now to see how many weeks of time-restricted eating we have to do before you see benefit on blood pressure versus say, arrhythmia in heart versus type 2 diabetes or GI reflux, etc. But stay tuned. And this is something that your body is designed to do and we can do.
That's great to hear. And I'm interested, yeah, Dr. Newman, go ahead before I ask.
Something Satchin said about how could something so simple do so much, I think is a great lead into one other thing that people may not know about ketone bodies, but which aren't just about ketone bodies, and helps, I think, to kind of understand the science of all of this. And that is that we talked about how ketone bodies are like batteries. They carry energy from one place to another, and they're burned for fuel. But that's not all they do. Ketone bodies, and this is really where my lab focuses, ketone bodies have a whole secret life of other things that they do that are kind of like drugs. They're molecules that they bind to stuff. They bind to other proteins. They bind to receptors. They turn things on. They turn things off. They even bind to the proteins around which your DNA is wrapped inside your cells. So they work almost like drugs to affect the way your cells function, to control how your genes are expressed, to control inflammation, to control other aspects of metabolism in your cells. And we're kind of just scratching the surface of what this all means in the big picture, how these molecular actions relate to big picture things like brain health or weight loss. But it's clear that this is probably part of the answer to the question of how can simple changes affect so many things. But it's not just ketone bodies. That's the other key thing. We've learned so much about ketone bodies because they're cool, okay? Because they're really interesting. So we've been studying them a lot. But I think that most of what we're learning about how interesting ketone bodies are actually applies to lots of other similar metabolic molecules. And just imagine if you're time restricted feeding, if you're intermittent fasting, you're changing your body's metabolic state quite a bit from time to time. All of these different metabolites are changing in your bodies, and some are going up and some are going down, and they all have all these different things that they do in your cells, affecting your gene expression, binding to things, activating things. And that complexity, I think, just a symphony of metabolism helps to explain why things that sound so simple, like fasting, can have such broad biological effects.
That's fascinating. And what I'm hearing is that we have a lot of control over our destiny here. You even mentioned DNA, that's these things we're talking about are a way we can really take control of our health, which I think is a really great, important message. And we're starting to get a lot of questions about actually, tell me more about taking control of my health. But before I go to them, I want to ask you both one last question that you sort of alluded to, both of you, is, what else are you excited about that's coming ahead? What else are we learning in these fields that you think people might be interested in hearing about? What's coming next? Dr. Panda, maybe first.
Yeah, so we are very excited about this two things. One is what kind of, as I mentioned, what kind of conditions people have and how they can do time-restricted eating and what benefits it will give them. And second is another aspect of circadian rhythm is we're finding that almost all of us are taking some medications or supplements. And new research is showing that what time you take that medication, whether it's in the morning or in the evening or bedtime, can completely change how much benefit you get out of this medication. Some might have adverse side effect, and by changing the timing, you can reduce adverse side effect. You may be taking a medication without seeing a significant drop in your blood pressure, and by changing the timing, you can see. So that's very exciting. One thing that actually popped up in the question and I never explained is what is time restricted eating, how to do it. A very simple thing, you can self-select a 10 hours window within which you can eat everything, drink everything except water within a day, and try to stick to it for at least 5 to 6 days in a week. For example, if your first bite or first sip of anything that has calories starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, try to finish all your eating by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can go up to say 10 hours or 12 hours, but never be beyond 12 hours. Um, so that I just wanted to dive in and
Clarifying
answer
that.
one question.
Thank you. And Dr. Newman, are there areas of research you're excited that are coming?
I'm going to come back to the link between metabolism and aging. And something that we're working on now, which I'm really excited about, is understanding exactly how the ketone machinery in your body changes as you age, and what role that has in making an older brain, for example, susceptible to things like dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or delirium. And as we understand that, then the hope is that we can turn that into interventions, into treatments. So, for example, delirium, which might be the worst medical thing that most of the audience has never heard of, is a severe, acute, sudden confusional state that happens to people when they're really sick in the hospital, or especially around a surgery. And part of that involves your brain not being able to ramp up its energy production in response to that stress. So if we can understand how ketone bodies play a role in helping make some people more resilient to this than others, or helping your brain to cope with that kind of acute need for energy, then that's a whole new pathway of creating therapies for these, really serious but very difficult to treat conditions of aging. I'm really excited about that.
Wow, that is fascinating. All right, I'm going to dive into some of the questions that we're getting. Speaking of different ages, are there considerations for time-restricted eating at different ages? For example, is it appropriate for someone in their 80s to do it? Are they going to get the same benefits as someone younger? And this is a question I was wondering too. Is it ever too late? Does it work at all ages?
Yeah, so I think we are designed to eat anyone from 10-year-old to 100-year-old. I guess they can eat everything in a day except water within 12 hours. So that almost everybody can do. And if you want to get some health benefit, maybe you can try to shrink that to 10 hours. Particularly if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic or type 1 diabetic, you are at a risk for hypoglycemia. And if you're taking certain kind of medications, particularly type 2 diabetics who take certain medications, or if you're on insulin, then you should consult with your doctor before you do this, because in many studies, what we're finding is you may have to change your medication or reduce your dosage, which is a good thing, to combine it with time-restricted eating. And then if you are pregnant, then of course you got to talk to your doctor. And I cannot say whether pregnant women should do it or not, because there is not much research in this area. The only thing is I hear once in a while some pregnant person would come and say, I've been doing it for 12 hours. What's your advice? And I would say, just talk to your doctor. So that's my take-home message. And to make it much easier, if you are thinking about your dental health, anyone from 3-year-old to 110 years old, if you have teeth, then you should have at least mouthwash and and brush your teeth every day. So 12 hours of time restricted eating is just like taking care of your teeth. And if you want to get better benefit, maybe you'll floss. So that's 10 hours of eating. And if you want to go to the dentist and get it clean, then maybe you can try 8 hours or once in a while, as John mentioned, maybe ketogenic diet once in a while, or reduce your carbohydrates significantly for a month or a few weeks. And that's like going to dentist.
That's a great analogy, the dentist. We have a number of questions, Dr. Panda, about the amount of time. Is there an ideal or best practices on 8, 10, 12 hours that you're choosing to eat?
Yeah, so what we find is in most clinical studies, if we ask people to eat within 8 hours and fast for 16 hours, they can do it for 3 to 4 days. And then for other days, they go towards 10 hours of eating and 14 hours of fasting. And all of these clinical studies are giving some benefit. What is more important is just think about your lifestyle and see what time you can do. For example, some questions are, can I do from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. versus noon till 10 p.m.? The bottom line is, whatever window you can do, it's better to do that instead of eating random time. There is some research showing that early time restricted eating, if you start before say 10 or 11 o'clock, your first bite of calorie, and then finish early, then it might work better than late time restricted eating. There is some biological significance and habit also that play into it. One is your ideal circadian days should look like you should go to bed sometime in the evening or night, whatever time you go to bed. Try to be in bed for 8 hours so that you can get at least 7 hours of sleep, which is healthy by most sleep specialists. After waking up, do not eat for 1 to 2 hours at least, because that's when your night hormones are going down and your day hormones are coming up, and they don't have good effects on your metabolism when these hormones are changing their guards. And then after your first bite, try to eat everything within the next 10 hours. Most people with family or with job, they can manage to do it. And once in a while, if you cannot do it, try to do for 12 hours. And make sure that your last calorie is 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, because in that way, you can get good night of sleep. So now keeping this in mind, 8 hours in bed, don't eat for 1 to 2 hours, at least in the morning, eat for 10 hours, and your last meal should be 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Then you can come up with a window that works for you. Second thing is, if you start late, say noon, and you're trying to eat till 10 o'clock, most of our bad habits actually happen in the evening or night, because that's when we socialize, our guards go down, and then we can drink more alcohol or may indulge in many unhealthy dessert and other food. So from a practical point of view, if you are very disciplined, then it's okay. But if you are not that disciplined, then pay attention to reducing your alcohol and reducing your dessert, because there is no research that says actually alcohol at any time or too much sugar at any time is good for you. And by doing early time restricted eating, you can automatically control your alcohol and dessert.
That's a good point. Dr. Newman, there's a question about the fats that that people would eat on the ketogenic diet. Is there a downside to this? Does it affect cholesterol? Is that something you can speak to?
Well, let's talk a bit about, again, what a ketogenic diet means. And I'll say as preamble, I'm a doctor, but I'm not your doctor. And I practice hospital-based geriatrics, so I don't use ketogenic diets in kind of a long-term nutritional sort of practice. But I'll kind of fill you guys in what I know. So a ketogenic diet means eating a small enough amount of carbohydrates so that your body will start making ketone bodies. You have to eat something. So what do you eat? You mostly eat fats and a normal amount of protein. And all of the nutritionists that I've heard talk about a well-formulated ketogenic diet emphasize a couple of things: that you should eat a normal amount of protein and not overdo it. And that actually is really important because you can hurt yourself by eating too much protein if you eat nothing but steaks and bacon and eggs. So normal amount of protein. And the fats should mostly be healthy fats. And I think we've kind of learned that there is a difference between less healthy fats and more healthy fats. And for example, a Mediterranean style diet that's been shown in clinical trials to help keep your brain healthy involves healthy fats. Things like fats from fishes, from avocados, olive oil, things like that. And that should be the core of a well-formulated ketogenic diet. And in fact, most of the ketogenic diets that are in clinical trials, for example, in clinical trials to treat Alzheimer's disease even, are modified Mediterranean style diets. So take a look at what a Mediterranean style diet is, and that can help you in kind of picking out your food choices. The biggest unknown area, I think, with people who want to be on the ketogenic diet for a longer term, is this question about heart health. And I think it is still an unknown. Most diets don't have rigorous long-term, years-long, decades-long kind of data to know exactly what the effects of different diets are on long-term heart health. And that's certainly true for ketogenic diets too. We know that we get nervous about eating lots of fats, but what if they're good fats? What if they're not saturated fats, not trans fats? What if it's, Mediterranean style fats? And your cholesterol definitely changes on a ketogenic diet. I've heard cardiologists talk about if you drill down on the numbers, some things are getting, some things get what we think of as worse, some things get what we think of as better. But the bottom line is that is still an area of active research and controversy about what is the long-term effect of a ketogenic diet on heart health. And you'll hear strong opinions on both sides. So certainly talk to your doctor and do your own research, especially if heart problems are something that you may be dealing with and you're thinking about trying a ketogenic diet.
How about gender differences when we're talking about the ketogenic diet and time-restricted eating? Is there a difference for males and females here and how well they work or what we know?
So for time-restricted eating, at least most of the animal studies have been done in male mice. The female mice experiments are very limited. But the female mice experiments that are done, those are mostly done on female mice who are in a experimentally postmenopausal state, because in humans also we know that after menopause it's really hard for women to lose weight and they are more likely to get many metabolic diseases. So in that way, time-restricted eating works both for male and female postmenopausal females. Coming back to human studies, interestingly, the earliest indication that time-restricted eating may help people improve their health actually comes from cancer studies, breast cancer studies, showing that women who maintained at least 13 hours of overnight fast, so that means they were eating for 11 hours, fasting for 13 hours, and had breast cancer once, they had low risk for getting a relapse in their breast cancer. And the same group also published that women who are doing time restricting or overnight fasting for 13 hours or longer, if they have breast cancer, then the prognosis of the getting cure was much better. So in that way, we know that this works for both male and female. Coming to weight loss and blood pressure and all other indications, most of the studies include both male and female, and in all cases, we do see health improvements. But at the same time, I must say that the studies are small enough to say whether females lose 3%, whereas males lose 4%. Those kind of studies have not been done yet. So those are in response to gender differences.
Thanks. Dr. Newman, gender differences, have you studied that?
Everything has gender differences, and
Okay,
in almost all cases, it's horribly understudied, as Satchin said. I think that ketogenic diets and ketone bodies are no exception. We're actually studying that in the laboratory, differences in between male and female mice and how they respond to ketogenic diets and how their own body's ketone systems change as they age. And there are clearly differences. In the biggest use of ketogenic diets in human clinical trials so far is in the setting of weight loss. And as far as I know, those studies have included both men and women, of course, and haven't seen dramatic differences between the sexes. But this is a great question. Everything has gender differences, and in general, we need to study them and understand them more.
That's great. It's a good reminder, the need for research in those areas. Dr. Newman, too, we got a question also about potassium, because if an older adult is taking extra potassium for blood pressure, and then maybe it leads to cramps, is this something you can speak to about how ketones in the system relate to potassium levels?
Oh, so this is a great question, and if you're thinking about trying something, again, I can tell you, my own understanding from my nutritionist and other colleagues who know much more about this practically than I do. One thing I've learned is not to be afraid of a ketogenic diet, that it's something that most people could probably try, but also it's something that a lot of people should do with their doctor, and that's in part because if it's a different metabolic state for your body, and like any big diet change, a lot of things in your body will change. So if you're taking medications, you should do this together with your doctor and think about how your medication needs might change. One example of that, which is kind of a good thing, is that people who have diabetes, who start a ketogenic diet in a clinical trial around weight loss or in clinical practice, often lose a bunch of weight and often have much lower blood sugars and often actually have to have a plan for reducing their blood sugar medications, so that their blood sugars don't go too low. So definitely, if you take medications, talk to your doctor ahead of time. But also, the other reason to talk to your doctor is so that you can get your blood checked after you start a ketogenic diet, particularly for things like potassium, because it can change the way that your body absorbs and excretes some of the salts like potassium. Everyone should probably do that. Some people need to take supplements on a ketogenic diet to keep things level. But certainly if you're taking medications that already affect these things, absolutely do this together with your doctor.
Good reminder. Thank you. We had an interesting question about the immune system. So, the pandemic has shown that aging immune systems, there's risk there. So does fasting and the ketogenic diet affect the immune system?
Yeah, so the circadian rhythm itself is a very strong regulator of immune system, because experimentally, if we take rats or mice and give them a jet lag, that is changing their day-night cycle by 8 hours, and if we do it for 3 to 4 weeks, then these rats and mice will become so susceptible to pathogens that simple pathogens that they could easily tolerate, now those same pathogens can kill them. So that's one aspect. The second is when mice and rats are sleep deprived, even for 4 or 5 nights, then they can become more susceptible to pathogens, including viral infection and flu-like symptoms. So in that way, having a good circadian rhythm is always good for building your resilience against infection. And what we are seeing in time-restricted eating experiments, we do see mice that do time-restricted eating, their immune system get much stronger, so that just recently concluded paper showed that they are also more resilient against infection. So that way, it's always means beyond sanitation and vaccination, you can, and social distancing, you can build your resilience by sticking to your regular sleep schedule, try to be in bed for 8 hours, and also try to eat everything within maximum 12 hours. The third thing that to keep in mind is right now, a lot of people will get in line to get the vaccine. And what is interesting, there is now almost 30 to 40 years of rich literature showing that those who slept enough for 4 to 5 nights just before getting vaccinated, they produce much better immune response to the vaccine, and they get protected for a long time for vaccines like flu vaccines, not COVID-19 vaccine, of course, and other vaccines against pathogens. So that's one rule. And then the second is there is also a lot of studies showing people who get vaccinated in the first half of the day build their immune response much better and much stronger than people who get vaccinated in the second half of the day. So try to be in line early in the morning. So these are some of the connections between immune system and circadian clock that are practical. And then the other thing that we find is in almost all of our mouse studies, and now we are beginning to see that among firefighters who are exposed to a lot of toxins and also have high systemic inflammation, their inflammation goes down if they do time restored eating. So it will be very interesting because firefighters are also very prone to different kind of cancers that are linked to inflammation. So the long-term goal is to see whether time restored eating can reduce your cancer risk. And as I mentioned, it does reduce the risk of getting breast cancer relapse, or reducing the risk of or accelerating cure from breast cancer. So that way, we feel that there are a lot of benefits of time restored eating or eating within 10 hours, improving your immune system, building that resilience.
Great. Dr. Newman, is there an immune system connection in your area?
There may well be. There's certainly a strong connection with aging and metabolism in general. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic we already knew that, but the pandemic has really driven that home, right? How diabetes is a risk factor for severe COVID, even among younger people, and how aging is such a powerful risk factor. And we've also known for so long that older people tend to have less, a less of a response to vaccines than younger people, and that's something that's incredibly important right now to protect our older population with the vaccines. And targeting aging, we hope, is a mechanism to ameliorate that. So the listeners have probably heard what is the best example of that so far of Joan Manick's work with TOR inhibitors to enhance vaccine response. I know she's studying this in the context of COVID-19 now. Is there a similar role for ketone bodies around modulating these aging-related mechanisms and immune function? And there might be. It's very early science. I know there's a lot of sense out there about anti-inflammatory effects of a ketogenic diet, and one of the mechanisms for that may be that ketone bodies directly reduce harmful inflammation, inflammasome activation on a cellular level. But how that molecular mechanism translates to treating an inflammatory condition or maybe enhancing the response to a vaccine, we have yet to work out. The science is early, but I'm actually very interested in that area, and I'm hopeful we can figure out a way that ketone bodies or similar metabolites might be harnessed to improve the immune response and maybe dampen the unproductive immune hyperactivation that you see in a disease like COVID. And that might give us more tools to help protect the health of older adults.
Terrific. Thank you. We are just almost out of time. So as a last question before we go, do either of you have any final word to our audience as they head off into deciding whether they're going to try either of these weight loss and general health methods? Quickly, Dr. Panda, quick take.
So Sarah, I was just going through some of the questions, and maybe I can quickly address. A lot of people have this question: can they drink coffee? What time they should drink coffee? And can they have sugar, a little bit half and half? All of that question. So the first thing is, you're drinking coffee because you have to wake up your brain. So that means you haven't slept enough. So so if you really, so there are 3 rules to coffee. One is you can drink coffee or black coffee before your eating window starts. If you haven't slept enough and your job depends on it, so very early mornings, a lot of you have to go to the job, and we don't want you driving sleepy. So it's better to be caffeinated and drive. Second is if coffee is the only love in your life, yes, go for it. But at the same time, I must emphasize that you should not drink coffee after lunch, because coffee can stay in your system for at least 6 and for many people up to 12 hours. So that means it will affect your sleep. And if you have bad sleep, then it can reduce the benefit of time restored eating. The other question is how little calories you can eat. I'll just give you some real science. So for example, if you drain all of my blood, I'm around say 140 pounds, then you'll get 5 grams of sugar. That's all in my blood. So that means when you have that half and half, that actually has more than 1 gram of sugar, that will increase my blood sugar, say from 100 to 120, which is almost like getting diabetic grains. So keep that in mind. If you're going to get your blood sugar test done in the morning after fasting blood sugar, if your doctor tells you, then you know that you should be going completely empty stomach. So that's what I mean. That's how you can get the best benefit of this. And the last word is, if you still have questions and how to do it, we do have a website called My Circadian Clock, just one word, .org. You can go and learn a little bit more about this. There is also an app called My Circadian Clock. It's a research app. It's not a commercial app. And that will also help you monitor your own circadian rhythm and eating pattern for 2 weeks, and then nudge you, guide you to adopt time-based eating. It's free for anyone, and we use it only for research.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Newman, any final word before we say goodbye to everyone?
Well, circling back to the beginning, when it comes to healthy habits, when it comes to maintaining your weight, try different things and find what works for you, and find what fits into your life, and find what your body goes with. And different people, it's different things. But whatever you try, the geriatrician in me is going to say, make sure that you move more. Make sure that you're more active. However active you are now, be a little more active tomorrow and more active next week. Having an active lifestyle is one of the most important things that you can do to keep every part of you healthy as you get older.
Great. That's a terrific message to end on. Thank you so much, Dr. Newman and Dr. Panda, both of you, for all your insight today. And I thank all of you in the audience for your terrific questions. Please join us at the end of March for our next Live Better Longer webinar, Gaming and Your Brain. I mean, no matter what kind of games, puzzles, your iPhone games, whatever it is, we are going to fill you in on what they're doing to your brain and how you can use them to help stay healthy for life. All right, so thank you again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a great circadian day.
Thanks. Everyone stay safe. Take care.